Hi everyone, it's Nasia from Les Maison Partners, and today we are talking about the return to the office movement. So, what is the impact of the return to the office movement on real estate? So, I'm sure everybody's pretty much heard about companies that are now requiring people to come into their office, employees to come into their office, either full time or on a hybrid schedule. So, we're going to talk a little bit about how that impacts real estate in a real way and how that might impact you if you're being called to return to the office. So, over the last few years, many of the companies, including Apple, Dell, Meta, they've mandated that their employees work in the office either on a hybrid or a full time basis. And that's a major change from the height of the pandemic, where a lot of people were used to working remotely. And after the height of the pandemic and in our current times, they're still now used to having remote work. And so that has become almost part of our society, part of people's requirements when they find a new job. So the challenge has become that many employees have relocated to different states. They've relocated far away from the office to live a more affordable, or they would like to live a more rural lifestyle. They want to be closer to family and friends, any number of things. And they've also managed to still be an active part of their organization at work. But now some of these companies are asking employees to begin to return to the office, and either it's a local office near them so that they can be closer to people who work in their organization, or it may be that they're asking them to relocate back to the original state where the headquarters are or where the largest office is that is near them. So some employees were actually hired as remote employees as well. So that's another factor that needs to be talked about a little bit as well. And this is a huge impact on childcare, transportation, employee health, and it can be quite costly to look at a return to work for an employee. So let's look at some of the numbers first. According to a 2024 Flex Index Q4 report, 32% of US firms require full time in office for corporate employees. Per the Flex Index Q4 report, which analyzes the state of flexible work, over the past 2 quarters, the percentage of companies requiring 3 days per week in office increased to 28% from 19%. So, those are just a few of the stats, and we're seeing it in real life in real estate. So people are asking, how does that impact me as an employee in real estate? So there are a couple of things. One, if you don't live near the office that you're being required to return to office for, and that office happens to be very far away, either in another state or far removed from wherever you are going to have to make decisions, of course, about whether you're going to stay with the organization and try to find remote work with another organization, or if you do decide to stay with that organization, the real life impact is that you are probably looking at relocation unless it's a commute that you truly like to make. And if it's a commute that you can make, depending on your needs and your current situation, everybody is different. So you have to make that decision for yourself based upon your family's needs, your needs, as well as what your company is asking. So if you're looking at potentially relocating, you are going to have to understand that there are going to be costs involved with that, obviously. People are going to decide how they're going to get to the office, but if that requires you being a little bit closer, that may require you actually listing your home and selling your home in order to move closer. Now, if you're moving closer and it happens to be in a large city, or if you're moving in state, if you're moving in state. If you're moving out of state, you also have to consider certain factors as well. The state that you are relocating to, is it substantially more expensive than the state that you were currently living in? You're going to have to incorporate the proceeds from your home potentially into a new home, and that home is it may be a lot costlier than the home that you're currently in. If you decide that you want to leave the organization and you decide to go with a remote only organization, you do have to consider as well, if you want to stay in your home as is and continue to live there and potentially take a remote position that might be a little bit less pay in your particular state. Or you might consider, if you have a remote, you can find a remote position that if you're going to stay in your home, then you're at least a little bit less affected. However, you may still need to move to a place that might be more affordable if you're going to take a pay cut. So let's look a little bit about people who are moving out of state to be closer to the office for return to work. So a couple things you're going to consider. I would highly suggest, if you do consider going into the office and it is in a different state, let's look at the real estate within that particular community. Can you do a commute closer to the office so that you don't have to necessarily live maybe in a city that's a little bit more costly? Maybe there's suburbs that are nearby. Obviously, your local realtors, such as Kristen and myself and Quinn, obviously are on your side and can help you navigate those particular questions. However, I would highly suggest that you do a field trip. Even if you're from the area, things could have substantially changed since you left. A lot of people left at the height of the pandemic. It's been a few years. I highly suggest going to the area to see what the current real estate market is, partnering with a real estate professional in your area. If you need help with that, obviously we can help you with finding a partner within that area, and consulting them about what the current market looks like there. You're also going to need to understand, is it you may be looking at a smaller amount of space, or potentially having some kind of concessions that you're making in order to live in the area where your office is. So you need to consider those factors. You also need to consider, obviously, the real life factors. If you're wear and tear on your car, if you have to do a commute, you're also considering the time within your car and time that you may have been using to do other things, such as more time with family, or the fact that you can do more things at home potentially, with such as household chores, things like that. So you have to look at the real life impact of that, as well as looking at what's going on in the real estate industry that's near you. Now, if you're going to stay in the same state, you're also going to have to consider that things vary quite differently depending on where you are in the state. And so, if you were in a more rural area and you're having to do a 1 to 2 hour commute, and depending on how you're doing that, whether it's via car, if you're doing a train, if you're doing a combination bus, you're going to have to kind of put that into your mind, whether you want to stay in your current area and do that commute, or if you want to relocate and do that commute. We are seeing more people who are interested in either relocating back to their out of state office, and to be closer to their out of state office. And people have said that it is worth it for them to be closer to the office if that's the case. But all of these things have real impacts on you and your family. So obviously, the final decision is always going to be up to you. But the real life impact is, we are seeing this during our current situation in real estate. What we are seeing as well are people who are coming and are looking at temporary options as they begin their home search within that particular area. So, what we will say is have patience. And I know that's kind of hard to say, but have patience as you're looking through your home search and finding out what's best for you, especially when you're relocating. Also, make sure that you have somebody who's local that's going to be able to help you navigate all of the cross country moves or even with in state large and moves. You're going to have to plan, plan, plan. And that's one of the biggest things that we can say to you. We want to make sure that your move, whether it's local or out of state, is one that's as seamless as possible. So, if you want to get started, if you have questions about how return to work might affect you and you might need some help trying to figure out what's best for you on the real estate front, we're here to help. And if we don't have the resources here, we absolutely have partners that can help us as well. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later.